Hello and welcome to Leadership Within. I'm your host, Vanessa May, and I'm with...
Myself, TK. I'm your lovely co-host.
I noticed I used my surname there. I don't know why I did that, but hey.
I know, right? Because we've just talked before we started recording about, non-formulaic intros. So our listeners don't get bored.
There you go. So today I really wanted to talk about something that happened in a conversation recently with a team. And so the subject that I'm calling it is, I want to steal your energy. And this happened when I was working with a team and someone had this amazing buzzy energy. And one of their colleagues turned around and said, wow, I really want to steal your energy. And it just really got me thinking, because energy matters, right, in leadership?
It does, yes. And there was something about this particular person's energy that, well, I guess was worth stealing, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, and this whole idea of stealing someone's energy, it sounds really complimentary, doesn't it? It sounds like, oh yeah, I'd love you to steal my energy. That you're complimenting me on how I show up and the energy that I bring. And yet also there's this part of it that feels a little bit like,
yeah, it felt a bit condescending when you said it like this. I mean, it's like, oh, look who's jolly today. And it's a serious meeting, I would love to steal your energy, which is, are you really serious about what we're talking about here? So, yeah, that's at least what I felt.
Yeah, so you find it condescending. The other part of me was just actually thinking about all the times where I've been in a room and the energy's been really flat, and I've felt like I have to bring energy, and that people have just ridden on the back of that, and that's really kind of pissed me off. They're not bringing their own.
Well, it's an interesting thing because everyone reacts differently to the circumstances, the energy and the vibe in the room, the emotional field, and also we can all be in different circumstances. We could all have different days. So, sometimes it can be said with genuine admiration. Sometimes, and, it can be like, well, you're not fitting in. Read the room. You're too energetic. I would love to be as energetic as you, but I'm worried about the topic we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of got me then thinking, okay, so we're talking about this thing called energy, and we're assuming that everyone knows what we're talking about. So in this context, I'm wondering if it's actually helpful for us to think about what do we mean by energy? What actually is it?
Well, I guess it's the forward momentum in a group conversation, meeting, whatever session we're having. I guess, from what you've just said, a call, right? Someone's coming in with initiative, pushing things forward, being there, sometimes filling the silence, sometimes, adding some positivity. I guess from how you've said it, it would seem like someone had the, merry-go-lucky, jolly, positive energy about them, rather than very forward-driven, battle line, soldiery, pushing forward, violent one.
Right.
At least that's what I'm reading. So the way I define energy is someone driving forward with positivity.
Yeah. Yeah. And what that's done then is it's kind of created what we might describe as the emotional weather in the room. It's like, so you can feel this high vibe, smiley, positive, oh, anything's possible kind of energy. And I suppose it's made me think, that's so often what gets underestimated with leaders, isn't it? That they set a tone, and that actually a lot of that is also contagious. So just like in this instance, it was a really positive high vibe. Equally, if you had a really low vibe and you were feeling not so fantastic, that can also create some kind of contagion in the room.
Yes, although as you were saying that, I remembered a situation of my own when, in a difficult crisis situation, someone was just joking left and they occupied a position of senior leadership. They were very jolly, joking around like if there was no problem to solve. Yet the situation was quite dire and we didn't necessarily move forward. Just because they brought this positive energy, I guess this was false positivity in my own interpretation. So,
Right.
the energy was there. The meeting was, quite fun and energetic. And yet the difficult decisions and difficult conversations didn't happen as they needed to.
Right. So you're kind of speaking to authenticity, aren't you? And maybe even we're kind of shifting the word from energy into presence almost, because it's not a performance thing, is it? The energy thing. It's much more about being present and fully in and there.
Yeah, I guess so. And when you say, someone saying, "Oh, I want to steal your energy," so what? They want to appear inauthentic. They want to feel it, yet they don't.
Mm, yeah. And that kind of makes me think about, well, so why do we kind of dim our energy sometimes or shrink? In that form of I was talking to someone today actually, and she was describing being on that continuum between not enough and too much. So it's like kind of shrinking and then really showing up. And then she was saying that someone had said to her, can I just give you a word to the wise? Like, so she thinks
Mm-hmm.
she's being really confident, and and this guy says to her, "Can I give you a word to the wise? I just notice like your energy is really up, and maybe that might be perceived as too much." And I just thought, oh, that's so shitty, isn't it? To have
Oh
someone
man,
say,
that's so messy. Really, you can't.
yeah,
If we're anyone that's reflective, a bit self-conscious, would constantly be vibrating. I guess authenticity is the answer. Just be yourself. Yet social exposure is an uncomfortable situation for most of us, right? So
yeah,
sometimes there's just a question of number, seniority. I might feel comfortable in a particular situation, and yet stand in front of a room of 500 people, and well, stage fright is there.
yeah. And it also makes me think about, I was talking to someone else today, and they were saying how, they're fairly new in with a new manager, and they were describing this idea that, they are themselves. They're really authentic. They like to be themselves, but they're not quite sure that that's okay with their immediate boss. Like, is that how you want me to be? And so I think sometimes, you know, we actually feel safest around those people that aren't doing that kind of like performative stuff. But also there's a part of us sometimes that's looking for a bit of permission to say, is this okay?
Well, I guess it's perfectly natural. It reminds me of a conversation I had recently with one of my clients, and um, so I had a really in-depth conversation with this particular person. That it was at a pivotal moment in our working relationship, when we were deciding if to move forward together or not. They were a bit surprised they did it because they didn't know that it's a renewal time and so on. It turned out that I informed them at the end of the conversation. So we had this conversation, which went rather well, and then we met a week after. And it's sort of interesting how in previous week's conversation we were at this moment of synchronicity, clarity, and on the same page, and yet. And when we started the new one, it took, I don't know, 20 minutes to get back to it, right? As in, we had to unwrap our masks that we normally carry around in the organization to be able to reach an understanding that we had a week before. And I was just like thinking, well, it's not automatic for people. Even if you build it can dissipate. It's something that we need to care and, well, nurture.
Mm, yeah, for sure. And so if we were to kind of look at leaders and say, okay, these ones that have this kind of stealable energy, what are some of the things that they're actually doing that are helping them to be in that place of, dare I say, envy from others? or longing. Maybe envy's too big, but do you know what I mean? Like, what is it that these? I mean, are there any leaders around you where you just think, God, I'd really like to be like you when I grow up?
Yes, absolutely. There's a particular leader I have in mind. Their stealable energy has caused me quite a stir when I first started working with them, because I thought, well, what the hell, right? I was preparing for a very difficult session and they treated it like a joke. I said, well, hey, I'm going to lead this particular session and it's going to be a nightmare. Carnage, I said. And he said, really? That can't be that bad. And at this particular time, I didn't know their brand of humor, which they have applied. And I was like really taken aback for like a week before I really understood that it was a bit of a joke. And they were like, possibly testing me, which is fine. It's possibly a part of their job to evaluate my performance. But now I understand that they're using humor. They're using this shine and this stealable energy of positivity to go through some tough stuff. Dare I say shit. So I really admire them that they keep their smile on. Although obviously there's, if you're at this end of the spectrum, there are bound to be difficulties and negative aspects of constantly being positive.
Right. So it's not necessarily being positive, but maybe it's also, or instead being, okay, giving a sense of we can just carry on, we can keep going, all is well, even when it's a bit chaotic.
Well, to be honest, I don't necessarily find that particular attitude that productive. Sure, right? Well, it's because sometimes we're at a crisis and we need someone to say, fine, it's bad, all right? We're in deep, we're up to our necks in it and we need to figure it out. We can do it. Yes, absolutely we can. But I will acknowledge the gravity of the situation.
Yeah.
Whereas, and this particular person I have in mind is not necessarily adept in doing that. Right? Yeah. Because it requires you to say, the situation is bad. I try myself to be a person like acknowledge, okay, we've effed it up, but let's regroup. Let's do our best. We're doing good work. We can make it. But I will acknowledge that the situation is difficult and it requires us to go the extra mile. I hate false positivity.
Yeah. It's dangerous in a way, isn't it? Because I notice sometimes I'm thinking of someone in particular where they do that whole false positivity, or they do passion and excitement really well, but it trips into anxiety. Like it almost feels like it's delusional at times.
Yeah. And it's like, you feel like, oh my God, you're left on the battlefield because they're flying high.
It's like, what the hell? So the other piece to this as well for me is, and this is something that I have to really work on in myself, because I can be very aware of how things are landing and then managing myself accordingly. So, I think people with stealable leadership aren't doing that. They're not worrying about the impact to the point that they're hypervigilant. They're just doing it. They're just landing. They're just, walking their own path. And I think for me, that's almost synonymous with giving themselves a certain permission to like take up their space and to, I see so often, well, maybe it's because I do it or can do it, is that kind of hesitancy to like fully be yourself when you can see a reaction in someone else. So you just kind of self-manage.
It's courage, isn't it? It requires a lot because you expose yourself. And, if you, the only way not to make mistakes is not to do anything. And if the stealable energy is the energy of moving forward, you are moving in a direction, not only pointing, but going there. Sometimes it can be wrong. sometimes it will be judged as inadequate. Often so, especially in the situations of crisis that really require leadership. True leadership is, making the decision that's difficult and not obvious. Because if it is obvious, you don't need particular skills to make the obvious choice.
Yeah.
I just think, it is difficult. It is the essence of leadership, but also I think it doesn't have to be courage for courage's sake. I think, the instinct of caring, right? If someone would say, well, I want to steal your energy, your positivity, I would say, well, you don't have to steal it. I can give it to you.
Oh, nice.
What would make you think about that positively, right?
Yeah.
What is it? Let's talk about, what's bringing you down and see what we can do, right? I'm here with you. I am sharing it.
Yeah. And so what I like about that is it's reciprocal. It's not kind of leaving you in this place of like, I'm going to suck all your energy out of you and you're going to leave the room depleted and tired. What you're describing is much more of a sharing energy, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, I don't know if it works in a way that someone can, there are people that can absolutely drain your energy, although I don't think it transfers onto them. Unless they're like, they derive sadistic pleasure from, someone's misfortune, which I hope, there aren't a lot of people like that. They're just the margin. But normally, people just want to see they're not alone in this.
Yeah. So if we were to kind of bring this all into something that actually is useful for listeners, one of the things that I'm aware of, I think we've talked about it before, is about capacity and like bringing intentionally in the energy that you want into a meeting or into the day or a goal or whatever it is, right? But being aware of your capacity and then choosing consciously given what's available to you. I mean, that's like a simple practice, isn't it, that people can do. How else would you recommend thinking about your energy as a leader or using energy?
I think it's, I often show up with too much energy, and for me, it's not overwhelming with, my attitude, my, not dominating the conversation, making sure there's enough space for people to launch their own energetic balloons to be able to be a part of the process we are in, right? Sometimes if someone is driving it forward too much, social loathing is one thing, which is people stepping back. But the other thing is like people might feel like there's no space for their own brand of energy.
Yeah.
Encourage, share, invite.
Yeah, I love that. What did you call it? Something balloons?
Oh, the energy balloon, right? So in my own... it's just like, blowing the trumpet and in the space is occupied by this sphere of energy that we're projecting. And that's what I'm imagining here, right? And people want to squeeze in. People might have a different shape or brand or color of the energy they want to add, the ideas, the opinions, whatever style of communication, whatever action they want to take in. And it's just important that even though you're as a leader expected to be the leading balloon, it's all about, inviting others in with their own shapes. And sometimes if there's low energy, it might be none at all. It might be someone sitting back just absorbing. And that's fine. And I think, it's just creating an environment for people being able to share that, their energetic state is very low and they'll be passive because, well, that's their capacity for the day.
So I really like that. So I think that's a really lovely note. Excuse me. A lovely note for us to finish on, which is like, okay, so know what your energetic balloon is, but also invite others to bring their energetic balloons in and like there's no right or wrong. It's just consciously choosing.
Indeed.
So
see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Until next time.